The arrest of an American in a foreign country on charges like this should be of concern to all Americans. I think the biggest concern we might have is that the US government has not been able to deter any of these arrests. And so, unfortunately, Mr. Gershkovich and his family are facing the same thing that Paul faced and has been facing now for over 4 years. I don't know that it complicates or impacts Paul's case directly, other than that now there are two Americans who both have been charged with espionage, and I assume Mr. Gershkovich will be convicted because that's the way that these sorts of cases tend to work out. And so it may create a new challenge or a larger challenge for the US government, for the State Department, for the White House to find a way to resolve it because they have not yet been able to resolve Paul's case. In the past, the cases have involved different charges. And so when Trevor Reed came home and Paul was left behind, that was a less important case to the Russians. The same with Miss Griner's case. I think now that we're dealing with two cases that are identical, that are of the same seriousness to the Russians, that really they should be treated with the same resources. And so I don't see how the US government can use the same resources for those two cases and leave either one of these people behind. Our family hasn't been able to speak to Paul for almost a week now. We learned from a third party that he had been moved to a prison hospital. He doesn't have any medical conditions, but while he's at the prison hospital, he's been unable to call home. So we're hoping to hear from him by the end of the week. It was coincidence, as far as we can tell. Paul had been scheduled to speak to our parents in the middle of the day and had also been scheduled to speak to US Embassy officials. And I think what has happened is that the Ministry of Defense was going out and recruiting prisoners to go to the war, and they didn't want to see Paul. And so Paul and some other non-Russian prisoners were moved to the prison hospital just to keep them out of the way. I've struggled with what advice to give to any detainee's family. I think that the challenge really is that each of us makes different decisions. When we first were trying to help Paul, we were counseled not to speak to the media. And that's, I think, a little bit old-fashioned. It's a way that we used to deal with hostage situations, and wrongful detentions are slightly different. But I can understand how some families don't want to speak to media, or maybe don't have the resources to engage with lawyers or lobbyists or other people. So I would tell them to marshal whatever resources they do have, though, because if Mr. Gershkovich's case follows the same one that Paul's has, they may be having to do this for many years. The Kremlin detains Americans for strategic reasons and to extract concessions from the US government. So the fact that they are detaining another American means that they have a plan for that person and a reason to hold them. And I don't think it's a domestic reason. I don't think they're trying to show their people that they're strong by arresting Americans. I think it really is, they are either preparing for or want to be prepared for when they need to have two people who can be traded for spies. Paul was sentenced to 16 years in prison. And so there's a good chance that I will see him, even if he has to serve the entire sentence. But it would be such an important thing for him to get home and see our parents, who are both in their mid-80s now, and who frankly may not survive another 12 years until the end of his sentence. And so it would be just a huge relief and so much happiness to know that he was able to come home and to be with them again before they die.